Grant winced and hung up. Angie just seemed a little strange, maybe a little colder than usual. And who could blame her? This damn project forced him to work late more often than usual, and in ways he couldn't plan ahead for. He couldn't believe how much he loved his fiery, beautiful young wife, and she was so damn patient. At first, he was hurt that his work-life balance was ridiculous right now, and that they were suffering because of it. She was suffering because of it. He explained to her that he was hoping for a promotion, and at first she understood. But after a few weeks, she started saying he didn't need a promotion. Now she said almost nothing. He knew that he came home tired and stressed, which meant that not only did they have less time together, but she also had to deal with him being in a bad mood more often. What made the situation even worse was Kelly. Kelly Dyson was assigned to work with him on the project. She was from the purchasing department, and they played a significant role in the success of the task he was given. She had just graduated from college and was 6 years younger than him, 22. She was smart enough to be put on this project when it would normally have been assigned to someone with more experience. There were two more things about Kelly. At 5'7", blonde and curvy, she was extremely attractive. She was also too interested in him. She started showing signs immediately over 2 months ago. Grant wasn't vain, but he knew he looked good, 6 feet tall, well-groomed, with wavy brown hair that he hated, but that women seemed to like, so he's seen this before. But no woman has ever kept trying before. It started with her flirting, then despite his lack of response, she moved on to touching, nothing that at first seemed inappropriate, but now it seemed like she always found a reason to put her hand on his shoulder, arm, or back. Grant thought one day that he should tell Angie about this, but she had a temper, and he was afraid that she would lose her temper, or perhaps make a scene and cause problems for him here. Besides, he was a man, and men weren't supposed to be afraid of women. They were supposed to want that kind of attention, or so he was raised. So while he didn't encourage her, he didn't do much to dissuade her. And he never told Angie. Another thing that bothered him was that part of him admitted that this might not lead to a promotion or the money that came with it. He knew he could never get back the time he missed with Angie, but he would do whatever it took to make it up to her. Angie was unhappy. Not as happy as she was when she met Grant 5 years ago. He did everything possible to win her heart. Her family was sure that he was the one even before her. He treated her like gold and even easily dealt with her temper, helping to diffuse it most often. Angie's grandparents moved to Houston many years ago from South Florida, and before that they lived in Puerto Rico, where they were born. Her mother married a local man, but Angie's Hispanic heritage showed through. Her skin had a permanently tanned appearance, and when she really tanned, it became even darker. Her large eyes were so dark brown that they appeared black, and her hair was brown with shades of red when she spent a lot of time in the sun. She was 5 feet 2 inches tall, slender, with small but firm breasts. But Angie saw tall Texas blondes and was jealous of their big breasts, big hair, bulging butts, and big guys. She knew she was exaggerating. There were people of all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds in Houston, but she made that perception her reality. Then one day Grant walked up to her in college and started talking. For some reason, she couldn't understand that he was serious towards her. It's not that she doesn't date. She had many, and even several serious, boyfriends since her school days. But for some reason he fell into her mythology and could not be interested in a non-blonde, non-cheerleader. But he made her incredibly happy, and in the end she responded in kind, agreeing to marry him. He got a job in the production department of an oil company, and she used her business degree to get a job at the regional headquarters of a coffee chain. It didn't seem that important, but she knew there would be opportunities for advancement. 4 years passed, and they had a good life and a good marriage. They did everything together and had a fun circle of friends. Everything changed a couple of months ago. He was excited about the project he was assigned to lead. The prospect of promotion was good news for them, and he only had one late night in the first week. Now he works late every night, and the last 2 weekends too. When he was at home, he was tired and irritable. He kept telling her that it would end soon, but she didn't believe it anymore. If this was how it would be, she didn't want him to get the position. They haven't gone out with friends for 8 weeks. They haven't even received an invitation in the last 2. She lost her temper several times, but he still worked. Grant felt exhausted. He was so tired, but so close to finishing his sentence. He tried to explain to Angie that this might be the last week of late nights, but she just rolled her eyes. He didn't blame her. He foolishly promised this in the past, trying to avoid quarrels, although he knew that this was not true at that time. As much as he was glad that he would soon be spending more time with his wife, he was also glad that he would be free of Kelly's endless attempts to seduce him. They seemed to intensify this week, as if she knew she would miss her chance once the proposal was complete. Her attempts over the past month have been hard to ignore. It seemed like every time he turned around, she was there, bending over, her short skirt riding up to show her stocking top, or leaned over above his desk, her breasts almost falling out of the bra visible in her loose, low-cut blouse. To make it even worse, Angie and he hadn't made love in about 3 weeks. They had a wonderful sex life, both had healthy desires, but they both stopped trying to initiate sex, she because of anger, he because of fatigue. Kelly noticed the tension and surprised him a couple of weeks ago by trying to massage his shoulders. He pulled away several times, but she kept trying and eventually he gave in. He was tense, and it was nice. No harm, no foul, right? Angie hung up after talking to her mother. She inherited her personality from her, but had just learned that she still couldn't match her mother when it came to letting someone know they were wrong. She was still a little dazed. She called complaining about Grant and his precious project, and her mother interrupted her, telling her to stop whining and be a wife. That she was selfish and should put herself in his shoes, that he was doing this so they could have a better future. Angie didn't agree with all of this, but it made her feel a little guilty about how things had turned out between them. She knew she had contributed to the worsening situation and decided to make amends when he returned home. But he'll be tired, so maybe she should do something different. Then she came up with an idea. She will go to their favorite diner and bring him dinner. They can even eat together. She knew that Kelly would be there, but she hoped she would give them a few minutes to enjoy their meal alone. She looked at her watch and realized that there was time, so she ordered food and left. Angie entered through the main entrance to the lobby. The oil industry was large in Texas and operated 24 hours a day, so there were shifts of operations staff monitoring processes at outside facilities. Although the lobby was open, at night you had to check in with security. Luckily, the guard knew her and waved his hand to let her through with a smile. Angie took the elevator, the smell of food becoming more intense in the enclosed space. When she reached his floor, she walked out and headed towards his office. The lights in the hallway were mostly off, with only one of the 10 lights on for safety. At this time of the evening, there was no one here except Grant and Kelly. She saw light coming from his office area. He worked in a small department that had a work area and a writing board at the entrance. There were windows inside the corridor through which you could see what was happening. Grant had one of 4 offices in this department. Angie walked over and reached for the door handle. As she did so, she looked past the desk and into the open doorway of Grant's office. Kelly stood behind him as he typed and looked at the screen. She had just started to turn the handle when she saw Kelly slowly taking off her dress. Angie's jaw dropped. Kelly was wearing heels and thigh-high stockings, no panties, and no bra. Angie saw her large breasts and suddenly felt inadequate. All her complexes about her small body returned from the depths where she had banished them. Kelly then reached out and began to massage Grant's shoulders, and Angie saw him close his eyes and her blood began to boil. She turned abruptly and rushed towards the elevator, throwing her food into the trash can along the way. Descending into the lobby, she almost ran, not noticing the guard, and tears of disappointment, pain, and rage flowed down her cheeks. Grant felt Kelly's hands on his shoulders. He closed his eyes in anger. Now, he thought, they were 15 minutes away from leaving, and she was trying to distract him again. He pulled away and turned to her. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed, seeing her naked figure. "Get dressed. I'm fed up with this crap." I tried to be polite, but you don't seem to take a hint. I'm married, happily married. I'm not interested in dating you or anyone else." Kelly turned pale and dressed without a word, then walked out, swaying her hips. Grant was so nervous that he paced back and forth for several minutes after she left. He let it go too far. Finally, he remembered that he only had a few edits left. He sat down, finished them, and sent the proposal to his boss for review. Ready, Grant put on his coat and walked out of the office into the corridor. Looking at his watch, he realized that this would be the earliest he would return home in recent weeks. As he approached the elevator, he pressed the call button and realized that he could distinctly smell barbecue coming from the trash can. It was strange. The cleaners were already coming and going. He shrugged and decided they must have missed one. Angie barely remembered the drive home, except for the moments when she had to take her foot off the gas, realizing that she was speeding. Her tears had dried, and she was almost shaking with anger. How could he? A lot of unpleasant words and just plain bad words came out of her mouth as she closed the door with a bang, entering from the garage. She needed to break something. She decided to leave and then shouted, "To hell! Let him go!" She walked up to the master bedroom and tried to figure out where to start. Should I pack up his things and put them outside? Or just throw it on the lawn? Why do you need to do anything at all? Maybe make him do it. Her anger and indecision prevented her from doing anything other than being angry for the next 30 minutes. Suddenly, she saw a flash of headlights through the upstairs window and realized that Grant was driving into the garage. She thought quickly and did something she had never done before. With great effort, she suppressed her anger, took a deep breath, and went to the bathroom as soon as she heard the garage door close. Looking in the mirror, she was convinced that she looked normal. Luckily, she stopped crying an hour ago. A cold smile slowly appeared on her face. Angie was going to get revenge. Grant walked through the door and placed his briefcase on the bench in the hallway. "Angie, I'm home," he shouted loudly, not knowing where she was. As he entered the kitchen, he heard her coming down the stairs. She walked in, and Grant sighed inwardly when he saw her even expression on her face. "You're early." "Well, technically I'm late. But that's all, dear. I sent a proposal. No more late nights. Well, maybe one next week when they present him to the council." Angie simply turned and walked out of the kitchen without smiling. Grant sighed loudly this time. He didn't blame her, but he hoped that the news would return them to their previous state. Now he knew it would take some work. It was so hard for her to pretend that she knew nothing about his relationship with this blonde. She had to make every effort to sleep in the same bed. When he tried to initiate sex for the first time in almost a month, she turned away and said it was her women's day. She heard him sigh, and then after a while he fell asleep. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw this perfect blonde with her big firm breasts, round ass, and long legs. She woke up, breathing heavily, not realizing that she had fallen asleep. What's wrong with her? Damn him. The next morning, Angie sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee and making plans. He was still sleeping, which didn't surprise her. He slept late on the weekends and then went to the office. She's already decided to play on her lie about Women's Day and claim she's in pain to avoid it all over the weekend. She thought about it and felt that if she kicked him out or left herself, it was as if he would win. It wasn't enough. She wanted him to suffer the same way she did. Her anger flared again this morning, and she hugged him like an old friend. It banished those strange sexual thoughts and dreams she was experiencing and helped her focus. Her plan was simple at first glance. She was going to sleep with someone and make sure he saw it. The problem was that she did not know with whom and how to synchronize it. She realized that she would have to bear with him until she figured out the details. Grant was on edge because of Angie. Nothing could make her smile. All weekend she lay in her bedroom, claiming that she was in severe pain due to Women's Days. He was worried because it had never bothered her this much before. After the third attempt that Saturday to offer help, she told him to go play golf or something, so he did just that. Sunday was no better. He wanted his wife back. Damn it, he was here all weekend. His project is complete. On Monday, she at least got up to go to work. She still hadn't softened up, and Grant decided he'd have to order flowers and plan something special soon. At noon, his boss called him in and told him the good news. They liked his proposal, and the CEO decided to present it to the board on Wednesday night, and they wanted him to introduce it. His boss said the raise was already secured, and it would be official in the next pay period. They were confident that the council would approve it. Grant came home that evening and told Angie the good news, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled. If Grant hadn't been so excited, he would have noticed that the smile didn't reach her eyes. Angie now knew the day and time. Grant said the council meeting always ends promptly at 7. He assured her that after that they would never have events. Considering the time it would take him to get home, he would be home by 7:30. Now all that remained was to find the man. Angie planned to tell her boss that she needed to leave work a little early on Wednesday. She thought about using a dating app, but felt it was giving away too much information. She decided to do it the old-fashioned way and knew the right place. There was a manufacturing facility next to her office, and they worked there in shifts. There was a bar nearby, mostly frequented by workers looking to relax after their shift. She saw that the day shift ended at 4. This should be enough time to find someone, return home, and make a scene for her cheating husband. Angie took her makeup bag with her and wore a loose ankle-length skirt and button-down blouse to work. Quite appropriate. In the car, she unzipped her skirt and stepped out of it, revealing the tight miniskirt she was wearing underneath. She unbuttoned the top of her blouse and applied some makeup using the rearview mirror. Great, she thought. She didn't have big breasts like Kelly, but she learned how to get attention in high school and still loved doing it when she went out with Grant. The thought bothered her, so she pushed it aside. She drove a couple of blocks down and parked at the bar, looked at her wedding and engagement rings, then took them off and put them in her purse. She hesitated, but thought of the perfect Kelly standing naked next to Grant, and this gave her determination. Many heads turned when she walked in alone. She hadn't really thought through her plan, so she just walked over to the empty chair at the counter and sat cross-legged. She looked to the right at the bartender, deciding to have one drink to calm her nerves. Before he looked in her direction, she was surprised by a rough voice from the left. "Let me buy you a drink." Angie turned her head and tried to hide her disgust. The man was probably twice her age, overweight, dirty, and with breath that smelled like whiskey. He gave her what he must have thought was a charming smile, but all she noticed was the missing tooth. He raised his hand as if to place it on her shoulder, and she reflexively moved away, thinking, "What have I gotten myself into? It should have been different. I was going to choose among all the handsome guys." A hand grabbed the whiskey-scented man's wrist and stopped him before he could touch her. "Why don't you go back to your desk, Frank?" Frank looked surprised, angry, and a little scared, one after another at a fast pace. Stepping back, he turned and hurried away as the man stepped forward and Angie glanced at him. Compared to Frank, he was handsome, but upon closer inspection, she realized that he was quite normal, perhaps a little above average. "It will still fit." "Sorry, miss. Girls don't come here often and Frank is a little drunk." Angie smiled, thinking, did he call me a girl? And how the hell did this guy get drunk so fast? Shift ended just 20 minutes ago. "My name is Bubba." "Hi, Bubba, I'm Angela." Angie smiled. "Bubba?" she thought. "Are you kidding?" Well, her plan was to find a Texan hunk to pit him against Kelly. Let it be Bubba. Bubba bought her a drink, and as they chatted, she realized that this guy was really built hard. He was 2 or 3 inches taller than Grant, and his shoulders were much broader. He looked muscular, perhaps due to physical work. He didn't seem too smart, but she wanted sex, not a relationship. Angie constantly looked at her watch. She wanted to be home no later than 7:15 to make sure Grant would see her in the process. She might need to do it at 7:10. This guy was really a little slow, but at this point, this was her best chance. Angie began to give him signs of attention. He clearly liked it, but he still didn't take any steps towards her. It seemed that she herself would have to take matters into her own hands. Bubba didn't react any differently than he should have. Finally, despite the anger boiling inside her at Grant, she felt that she liked it. One more glance, and she leaned over, whispering, "Will you follow me home?" "With pleasure," he replied. She made sure Bubba parked on the street a couple doors down from hers. Either he didn't understand that she was married, or he didn't care. Perhaps both. She led him upstairs. At the top of the landing, she turned left toward the master bedroom out of habit. Something made her stop, and then she turned sharply and almost collided with Bubba, who was right behind her. "Sorry. Here." She led him to the guest bedroom. Luckily for her, Bubba took the lead. Grant couldn't stop smiling as he pulled into the driveway. He smiled so much in the boardroom that he was afraid they would think he was an idiot and change their mind. He got a promotion. Not what I expected. He was made senior director, jumping over the position of director. The pay raise was better too, and they surprised him with a week's vacation in Galveston at one of the company's beach houses. He can finally make amends to her. He was sure that this would win her back. He quickly entered the door. Angie, we got a promotion, honey." Angie wasn't in the kitchen, so he headed into the living room. No, she wasn't there either. He saw the light above, smiled, and took off up the stairs 2 steps at a time, then stopped 2/3 of the way up. What was that sound? Then he felt like a zombie. Part of his brain knew he could hear, and the rest of him desperately tried to close the door in denial. He slowly walked up the remaining steps, feeling as if he were in a trance. The sounds were coming from the guest bedroom, and he continued walking in that direction, towards the light, spilling into the corridor. "Get out of my house, you son of a bitch," Grant shouted with all his might. "Get out, or I'll kill you." It was said loud enough for the man to hear. Angie heard too, and it scared her more than his scream. She rolled back and saw Grant holding a thin but heavy crystal vase in his hand. It was modern and had a square base and clean edges. Bubba was already on his feet. He looked like a hunted animal. He moved slowly, his hands raised in supplication, around the bed. Grant breathed heavily and picked up the vase. "I do not want problems. I just want to pick up my clothes and leave." Bubba pointed to the pile of clothes on the floor. Grant stepped back to give him space, but held the vase high with a deadly glare. Angie was paralyzed. She didn't know what to expect, but not this. Bubba was a big man, but smart enough to know not to mess with an angry husband with a gun in his hands. Bubba slowly leaned down and picked up his clothes, keeping his eyes on Grant, then carefully walked towards the door. Grant turned slowly to face him. When Bubba reached the doorway, he suddenly rushed towards the stairs and down. The door was heard to open with a bang. Then all that was left was to hear Angie and Grant breathing heavily. Suddenly, Angie pulled herself together and rushed at Grant, clenching her hands into fists and starting to punch him in the chest. "How does it feel, you cheating bastard? How did you like it, you bastard?" Grant simply fell to the floor, dropping the vase onto the carpet. And then he did something Angie didn't expect. A look of confusion and pain appeared on his face, and he sobbed, starting to cry. He raised his hands to cover his face and repeated the word, "Why?" over and over between sobs. Angie stood there, all her anger gone, just wondering what was going on. In her plan, this was supposed to be her moment of triumph when he realized he was caught, and she got her revenge. It didn't have to be like this. Suddenly, she needed to get out of here. She planned to kick him out, but all she could think about was running. She rushed to the closet in the hallway and took a suitcase. Soon she had collected some clothes and toiletries that would last her for a week. She'll figure out the rest later. After getting dressed, she dragged her suitcase to the car, got in, and drove away. "Please, Angel, what's happened? Your dad and I can't help if you don't talk to us, baby." Angie was just sitting on the edge of the bed in her old bedroom. Her mother had changed the decor a bit over the last 4 years, but many of her old things were still there. She felt loved here, but it didn't clear her mind. Angie was tired. She knew that anger drained her energy, and the angrier she got, the more exhausted she felt when she finally calmed down. She had a lot to think about, and all she wanted to do at that moment was sleep. It was almost midnight, and now she felt bad because her parents were still awake, her mother was here, and her father was sitting at the kitchen table. Her mother knew her well and had to deal with this all her life. Her daughter had inherited her temperament, and she knew the burden it placed on her and everyone in her life. She also knew it had to do with her fiery spirit, which is why she was so much fun to be around. Carla has learned to cope with her problems over the years. Apparently, her daughter had some business to attend to. Okay, I'll just call Grant and see if he can tell me. No. Angela, we love you, we always will. And while we are on this earth, we will give you shelter when you need it. But I know you, baby. You have to let it out. You can't let it eat you up. Angie seemed to soften a little at her mother's words. I think we could all use some sleep. So, go to sleep, baby, and you can tell me in the morning. Angie darkened again, but nodded and allowed her mother to kiss her forehead before leaving the room. The next morning after breakfast, her father left for work. Her mother poured them each a cup of coffee and brought them to the kitchen table, which had been the center of family life since she was a little girl. She cried for the guys, saw quarrels and laughter, shared food at this table. Angie didn't sleep for a long time last night. After sitting for a while, she felt the need to take a shower. She felt pain down there that morning and tried not to think about why. Her mother was just looking for her, and she knew she had to say something. Mother. Carla simply waited, knowing that her silence made her say more than an answer. Grant. He cheated on me. Carla gasped, pain showing on her face. Angie knew how much they loved him and was starting to get angry, believing that her mother would protect him. Instead, Carla reached out and took Angie's hand. Baby, I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry. Her reaction finally brought some relief to Angie, and she began to shake. Then finally tears came out, and she began to cry quietly. Her mother was immediately at her side and hugged her as Angie cried into her apron. Grant was a mess. He sat in the bedroom long after he heard Angie leave. Finally, a repeated knocking sound brought him out of his trance. He forced himself to get up and investigate. He found the front door still open and the outside storm door banging against the frame in the wind. Grant knew the man he caught her with had left through that door, and so did Angie. When he arrived, her car was parked in the driveway. Why didn't he notice this? She always parked in the garage. Grant closed the doors and returned. He's so tired. It was one of the best and worst days of his life. The maximum and minimum occur within an hour of each other. Part of him wanted to drink, but he was too tired. He sat on the couch in the dark, still in his best suit, staring into space and replaying the scene in his mind. He woke up lying there, cold. He got up, got a glass of water from the kitchen, and went upstairs. He went to the bathroom and then went to bed, but the thought of making love to her there made him change his mind. He realized that his suit needed to be dry cleaned, got out of it, went downstairs in boxers and a t-shirt and sat down in a chair. Tears appeared, and he let them flow. He realized that he was already late for work and decided to come in sick. His boss answered the phone. Good morning, Mr. Taylor. This is Grant. Grant, how many times have I told you it's Hugh, especially now? Thank you, Hugh. Listen, I'm not feeling very well, and I need to take a sick leave. Grant, you don't sound very good. Too much celebrating last night, huh? He chuckled. I'll tell you what, why don't you just work some of the time you've been working, and we'll see you on Monday. Damn, I should have told you to do this last night. Say hello to your beautiful wife for me. Grant simply swallowed and spoke. See you on Monday. Thanks for understanding. For the next 4 days, Grant was a zombie. He didn't eat until his stomach protested so loudly that he ordered pizza on Saturday morning as soon as the place opened for lunch. He did not leave the house, despite what had just happened there. But there were also good memories surrounding him, and he essentially felt confused, sad, and a little angry, but most of all he felt sorry for himself. He avoided replaying the scene in his mind, forcing himself to block it out every time he started. It wasn't until Sunday that he finally did it. His slow ascent up the last half of the stairs, sounds of passion. Tears began to form as he stared at the living room wall. In his mind, he walked through the door of the guest room and saw his beautiful wife with him. He didn't even think, he just rushed forward and knocked him off the bed. He didn't remember grabbing the vase, didn't remember thinking at that moment how big this guy was. Then the idiot left, and he just remembered her screaming at him and pounding his chest with her little fists. She screamed. What did she scream? He needed to think. That's when the situation overloaded him. Think. What was it? Then his memory came to the surface. The cheating asshole. He didn't understand. He thought long and hard, and all he could figure out was that she must have assumed he was having an affair rather than actually working all those nights. Grant sighed and went to bed, hoping that tomorrow everything would make more sense. At least he would be able to take his mind off things once he got comfortable in his new position. Grant thought he did a decent job on Monday, acting normal at work, but from the looks of it, he wasn't scamming people. He didn't expect everyone to come to his new office to congratulate him. Grant was usually a good-natured and friendly guy, and people sensed that something was wrong. This was compounded by the fact that people expected him to be over the moon with his promotion. He didn't make it to lunch when Hugh called him into his office. After telling him to sit down, he sat down, looked him in the eyes, and spoke. Grant, this may not be my business, but what's going on? A dozen people have expressed concern about you. I see something is wrong. Grant sighed. He didn't tell anyone, but he felt he had to explain himself to his boss. It's Angie. She cheated on me. Damn it, Grant. I'm sorry. Angie, I find it hard to believe. You are sure? Grant took a deep breath. I found her when I returned from a council meeting. Shit. Hugh leaned back in his chair with a look of sympathy on his face. Why don't you take a vacation, leave for a week, or... Grant interrupted him. I appreciate it, but I've been sitting at home enough. I really feel like work will help me cope. Sorry, I just didn't take into account that so many people would be coming in today. I guess I had to explain himself to his boss. It's Angie. She cheated on me. Damn it, Grant. I'm sorry. Angie, I find it hard to believe. You are sure? Grant took a deep breath. I found her when I returned from a council meeting. Shit. Hugh leaned back in his chair with a look of sympathy on his face. Why don't you take a vacation, leave for a week, or... Grant interrupted him. I appreciate it, but I've been sitting at home enough. I really feel like work will help me cope. Sorry, I just didn't take into account that so many people would be coming in today. I guess I had to. Thank you, boss. If work seemed awkward to Grant, it was nothing compared to what happened at home that evening. He had not yet put his things down when the doorbell rang. He went to the front door and saw Mrs. Edison, the gossiping neighbor, and just being everywhere. Grant hated her, but surprisingly, Angie found her funny. The thought of Angie smiling hit him hard as he looked down at his neighbor. Hello, Mrs. Edison, what's wrong? Is Angie home? She asked, trying to look past him into the house. No, she's not there. The old woman just stood there, not even trying to hide her curiosity. Can I help you with something? Grant said after a moment. Well, I just wanted you to know that if you need to talk, you can trust me. I can keep secrets. Grant snorted, not even trying to contain his laughter. If she noticed it, she ignored it. I wanted to ask you something that some of our neighbors are wondering about. Who was the man who ran out last Wednesday night? He was naked, and where did Angie go with her suitcase? She blurted out the last few words in a raised voice as Grant slammed the door on her. Impudent bitch. Grant thought it might just get worse before something else came along to grab people's attention. Probably. Grant came in and made sure his evening was as normal as possible. He changed into shorts and a t-shirt, heated up some frozen food. Okay, that's not exactly normal, but at least he ate. then grabbed a beer and walked out into the backyard. They had a small terrace with a protective fence. The area was quite densely populated, and the houses were close to each other. It was a good starter home, and they were hoping to improve the living conditions. About halfway through his beer, he heard someone knocking on the gate. He sighed inwardly, thinking that this was another nosy neighbor. Grant. Grant just sat there. Grant, it's Pete. I know you don't want to talk. I heard my wife say that Mrs. Edison was already in the business. But I have one message for you, and then I'll leave you alone. Grant knew Pete a little. Seemed like a nice guy, recently retired, always helping neighbors whenever he could. Married to the second biggest gossip on the street. Grant was worried that Pete might have been sent by his wife, but his upbringing came back to him, and he spoke. "Come in, Pete. The gate is not locked." Pete opened the gate and entered. "Can I get you a beer?" "Thank you, but no. I need to go back. My wife doesn't know I'm here, and if she finds out, she'll extract information from me. She wants to steal Mrs. Edison's crown." Grant laughed. "I love her, but she just can't help but stick her nose into things." Pete sat down in the chair opposite Grant. "I'm sure you don't want to talk about recent events, but I just wanted you to know something." Grant frowned, and Pete noticed it, but continued. "This guy and his truck have never been here before, and I and several other people I've talked to. Who can be trusted not to talk," he quickly added, seeing the angry expression, "have seen any other people around your house, inside or outside, except your wife." Grant thought about this for a moment. Pete then stood up to leave. "I know this doesn't change anything, but I'd like to know if I were you. If you need anything, you know where I live." "Thanks, Pete." With that, Pete left. Grant sat and wondered what that meant. Apparently, this was a one-time thing, unless she went to see him. He decided to call Angie. He didn't know what he would say, but he knew they had to talk. It might not change anything, but they should at least discuss it. He called her cell phone, but the call went to voicemail. He expected this. Grant continued to call her every day, once, and left the same message. "Can we talk?" After a week, he started leaving longer messages, saying he didn't understand why she did it, and that he didn't want it to end this way. Unresolved. He also began leaving messages for Carla, begging her to call him. Nothing. He was persistent, but not crazy. 2 calls every evening after work, absolutely sober. Except for the last one. It was a grueling day at work. He was unpacking a box of personal items in his new office and found a photo of him and Angie taken on a boat at a pontoon party they had attended a couple of years ago. They were both so happy then. At home, he was about to eat, but discovered that all the boxes of frozen meals were empty and found containers of leftover food that she had prepared for him. He ate one, and the taste of her cooking reminded him of another thing he missed. He drank several beers instead of one. "Mom, this is Grant. Look, I'm sorry that you and Dad have to go through this. I know how much you love her. I wanted to say that I'm sorry for everything I've done. But she doesn't talk to me, and I don't know why she thinks I cheated. But I understand, if she believes that I did it, then I can understand why she did what she did. I guess I'll never get the chance to find out if we can fix this. So I wanted to say that I love you and miss you." By the end, his voice was shaking. He regretted it as soon as he hung up, knowing better than to talk while under the influence of alcohol. How did his life get so bad? Angie didn't feel any better after leaving Grant, and it bothered her. Work was going slowly, and she was irritable, more irritable than usual. She didn't tell her boss anything, just talked to some of her friends. The friends they hung out with stopped calling weeks ago because they couldn't do anything together as a couple. He called her, and for 2 weeks, she simply deleted the messages. But one evening, she missed him and was angry with herself because of it. So she decided didn't know why she did it. This bastard. She got so angry that she didn't listen to any more messages for a couple of days. But she didn't delete them either. Then she listened to them all, really listening. The words were the same, but she was listening to his voice. He seemed to be confused and in pain. Angie didn't know that Grant had called Carla. Carla listened to each simple message, asking her to tell Angie to call him. But her first responsibility was to take care of her daughter. And Angie showed no signs of softening. I wasn't depressed. I wasn't looking into space. Everything changed when Carla listened to the last message. What have you done? Carla's voice was low and cold. I do not know what you're talking about. What did you do to Grant? I didn't do anything. He cheated on me. Angie was worried. Where was her mother taking this conversation? He left a message and was very upset. He says he didn't cheat, doesn't know why you think that, but if you believe he did, he can understand why you did what you did. So I'll ask you again, what have you done? That bastard, he changed. This lying asshole, I have to. Angela, answer me. Okay, I have revenge. Angie straightened her chin at the last words and, knowing her mother's character, expected her to hit her. Instead, her mother went from expressing rage to sadness, the light went out of her eyes, and she sat half sideways next to her daughter, her shoulders slumping as she slowly turned and looked her daughter in the eyes. Oh, no, daughter. What have you done? I caught him the night you screamed at me. I decided that he should feel the same as I did. I found the man and made sure Grant saw us. I wanted him to know what it was like. Her mother sighed. So you cheated on him too. I didn't change. I have revenge. It was easier for Angie to scream and get angry than to be quiet and emotional, but her mother did not succumb to provocation. Carla simply shook her head sadly, stood up and walked towards the door. She stopped before the exit. Daughter, I believe that you found him. But think about it, okay? You made a bad situation even worse. I'm so sorry that you inherited this damn temperament from me. I am so sorry. Carla bit back a sob as she said the last words and then left the room, closing the door behind her. So Angie became angry again, convincing herself that he was faking emotions to make her feel guilty and look bad. The freak deserved it. What an impudent fellow, sleeping with that big-breasted blonde and then pretending he was the victim. He is trying to hide his behavior and blame everything on me. Then Angie decided it was time to take the next step. In her anger, she decided to file for divorce. He wanted to close this page, she will close it. Her friends had been urging her to do this for a long time when she told them that he had cheated on her. It was time to listen to them. It's been about a month since Angie left. Grant thought about it. He didn't count it as the day he caught her in bed with another man. It was the day she left. He talked to a few of his old friends, and they insisted that he forget her, get a divorce, and go have fun. Some of them were still single and tried to persuade him to go out to bars with them. He began to regret telling them about this. He continued to leave messages, but did not know whether she listened to them or deleted them. He drove past her parents' house last week and saw her car there. He didn't slow down and asked himself why he did it. He realized that despite the pain and anger, part of him simply missed her. He didn't realize how much of an impact she had on his life until she was gone. He thought about going to the cafe where she worked, but with her personality, she could cause a scene. He was sitting in his new office, looking over reports, when his new administrative assistant, Jen, who was also new to him, sent him a message that someone wanted to see him. He sent her a thumbs-up emoji. A man came in with a manila envelope in his hands, and Grant realized what was about to happen. Mr. Grant Walker? Yes, it sounded almost like a whisper. Sorry, sir, you are being served with a subpoena, he said with a genuinely sad expression on his face. Having said this, he turned and left, closing the door behind him. Grant simply put the folder down and stared at it. He saw a notification in the chat. It was from Jen. It said she would take calls and block his calendar for the rest of the day. She must have known what it was too. Grant returned home that night and placed the envelope on the table. He didn't do anything useful for the rest of the day. He followed his routine, changed clothes, heated up the food, grabbed a beer, and sat in the backyard. This time he took the envelope. Halfway through the beer, he opened it and read it. Did she file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity? He realized that she blamed him for this, but he caught her. Part of him had expected this, but he thought she would have irreconcilable differences. Wow, just wow. The next day, Grant came to work feeling predictably depressed. He knew he would have to deal with divorce. He couldn't ignore it and hoped it would all go away on its own. As he approached his office door, Jen raised her head and spoke. "Where are you? Mr. Taylor wants to see you." Grant thanked her and headed to Hugh's office. Grant's new office was next to Hugh's, as he was now one of the vice president's senior directors. "Good morning, Hugh. You wanted to see me." "Come in, son." Son. This was new. Hugh looked uncomfortable. Grant sat down and waited. "Grant, HR contacted me. Kelly Dyson has filed a harassment complaint against you." "What?" Grant jumped out of his chair, but Hugh motioned for him to sit down. "She claims that you made unwanted advances to her and tried to use your position to force her into sexual relations." "This is ridiculous. It's she who pestered me. I told her for 2 months that I was married and not interested in her." Grant fell back into his chair and closed his eyes. Could life get any worse? Then his eyes suddenly opened. Could Kelly really have said that to Angie? His brain began to work at increased speed when Hugh's voice brought him out of this state. "Does this have anything to do with Angie?" Hugh's gaze did not bode well. "No, boss, I swear, I never touched Kelly, but I think she might have told Angie that I was dating her. Kelly made it clear that she wanted me. I never knew if she just wanted to get laid or more. Honestly, I didn't touch her." Now Hugh looked as tired as Grant. "I believe you, and I'm sorry that this is happening now when you're already going through so much." "And do not say, Angie handed me a summons yesterday," Grant muttered. Hugh winced. "Sorry, son. Listen, I'll call someone from HR to talk to both of us. And then I want you to take the rest of the day off. You're no use here. You need to talk to a lawyer and start taking control of the situation for your own good." The conversation with Karen from HR did not calm Grant down. It will be a he said, she said situation. Karen listened to his side of the story and said they would discuss next steps. After she left, Hugh said, "You're in trouble if Kelly or HR finds out about Angie's accusation, or if Angie finds out about Kelly. I have an old friend who works as a private detective. He primarily works for divorce lawyers and their clients, gathering evidence or showing the lack of evidence in cases of infidelity allegations. He used to be the head of security for this building. I'll call him today and see if he has any advice. Now go home, get yourself together, and talk to your lawyer." Grant was seething with anger all the way home. He worked hard to get a promotion, and what did it get him? His wife slept with another man and then filed for divorce, claiming that he was the one who cheated. And now the woman who harassed him is trying to set him up. This is karma. Arriving home, he called one of his old friends, who was a lawyer. He did not specialize in divorce, but there were such lawyers in his firm, and he might be able to give him advice. "Grant, haven't heard from you for a long time, buddy." Mutually, John. "I know we are both busy people, so what happened?" Grant told him the story. "Damn, buddy, I'm sorry. You must feel like crap. Look, give me a day or two. I'll talk to one of my colleagues and get back to you. Okay?" "Thanks, John. Can you send me a copy of the documents you were given and give me permission to share them with whoever might take the case?" "Yes." Grant thought he would feel better after the conversation, but that didn't happen. "Will, this is Hugh Taylor." "I recognized your voice, Hugh. How are you?" "Fine, thank you. But one of my people is in trouble, and I hope you have some ideas on what he should do." Over the next few minutes, Hugh told Will everything he knew about Grant's situation. As for the situation with the wife, there is little that can be done except call a lawyer, as you suggested. If he decides to countersue, I can look for witnesses to the night he caught her, and perhaps investigate whether there is evidence that she has done this before. Hugh nodded in understanding. But the case of workplace harassment is simpler. Easier? Well, there should be. The entire building is equipped with CCTV cameras. Given the secrecy in the industry, I recommended this when we rented the space. It was approved and installed. Everything is recorded and stored for several months. Last month available locally. For anything older, you need to pull data from external storage. Everyone signs a consent to be recorded during new employee orientation, although I doubt anyone is paying attention. And what? So if she claims he harassed her at work, after work, and he says it was the other way around, there may be evidence on video who is telling the truth. Thank you, Will. I owe you a beer. See you soon. I have a call. Grant had actually worked from home a bit yesterday after talking to John, but today he needed to get things done and show Hugh that he could hold his own in the office. He was chewing on paperwork and significantly reducing his incoming flow when Jen sent him a chat message that Hugh wanted to see him in her office. Grant looked at his watch and realized he had missed lunch. It was about 2. He stood up, thanked Jen as he passed, and entered the office after Hugh beckoned him over. Grant nodded to Karen, the HR person who had been there yesterday. This did not bode well. Grant, I want to show you something. With that, he turned one of his 2 monitors so that it was visible to Grant. Karen remained seated and announced that she had already seen it. Hugh pressed play and the video began. Grant immediately recognized himself and his old office. Then Kelly came in. Grant immediately looked up at the ceiling and both Hugh and Karen laughed. Right there. Grant's eyes followed his finger and he saw a small camera next to a motion sensor that turned off the lights when the offices were empty to save electricity. I didn't know we had them either, Karen said. After watching a little more, Hugh paused and said, Human Resources and Security staff review together this, documenting every situation they find, but so far the video confirms your version. I'll rewind to this moment. Hugh fiddled with the mouse until he found the right moment. After Hugh indicated that he needed to watch, Grant saw the scene where Kelly filmed your dress. Someone had pixelated her nakedness, which was appropriate, of course. The video showed him getting angry and telling her to leave. We contacted her and showed her the video. She tried to get out of it for a moment, but then she broke down and admitted that she was trying to seduce you. She also admitted on camera that you never made her any proposals and refused all of her attempts. Grant took a deep breath. We're going to fire her, but wanted to know if you wanted to file a complaint. This may sound crazy, but please don't fire her. She's young, and this could ruin her life. And despite this, she is a valuable employee for the company. Can't you just force her take some course and make sure we don't work together? Regarding the complaint, can I wait to make a decision until I have thought about it? That's very kind of you, Mr. Walker. Let me see what my vice president has to say. We'll be back to both of you. With these words, she stood up, nodded to both of them, and left. Grant started to get up, but Hugh signaled for him to stay. There is something else I wanted to show you. This is none of HR's business, so I waited until she left. As I said, people are still watching the video in case Miss Dyson changes her mind, but we all think this is the end. Grant nodded. Hugh continued. Security contacted me about an hour ago. It seems that a couple of their employees found Miss Dyson even more attractive naked than dressed. Imagine that, he said ironically. So they spent extra time trying to find more angles from other cameras when she took off her dress. One of them found something and put it together for you. Hugh indicated that he needed to look at the screen again. Grant saw him and Kelly working on the proposal that last night, but it was on the left side of the screen. The screen was separated in half, and to the right was a blurry image of the elevator doors. He noticed a clock in the lower right corner of each image, showing the same time. Hugh saw Grant getting into it and pressed pause. The cameras in the corridors are not the best. Some only show certain angles, the camera on the elevator doesn't focus properly, and as you know, the hallways aren't fully lit at night. Additionally, our contract cleaning team thoroughly cleans office spaces and only vacuums hallways. And of course, they take out the trash. Security believes there is dust on the lenses of most corridor cameras. Hugh resumed the video. After some boring work and Kelly trying to show off her charms, the elevator doors opened and a figure stepped out, walked towards the camera and walked under it, disappearing from view. It was too blurry to see anything other than that it was a person. The view then changed to the right side. The figure reappeared as it apparently walked under the new camera, but it was from the back and it was walking away into an unlit plot. Grant was pretty sure it was a woman. Then it dawned on him as the figure approached the entrance to his old office. It was a woman. It was Angie. She had a box in one hand and was opening the door with the other, just as Kelly took off your dress. Then she turned and ran away, and Grant's heart broke for her. The cameras changed faster because she was running. She was throwing the box in the trash when Video Grant turned and realized Kelly was naked and chased her away. Grant put his head in his hands, trying to control the whirlwind of emotions. He remembered smelling the barbecue in that trash can. She tried to bring him dinner, and she left too soon to see the truth. How is he going to fix this mess? I can't give you a copy of this video without huge legal problems for me, you and the company. But I talked to our general counsel, and she said that if your lawyer is aware, he can get a copy to use as evidence. I wanted you to know. Thank you, Hugh. I'm so sorry, Grant. Grant was sitting at home that evening, drinking his usual beer in the backyard. It seems Mrs. Edison stopped knocking on his door about a week ago, and he didn't give anyone a chance to stop him and find out information. He decided to call John. Grant, great point, buddy. I have someone I trust to take your case, and she is here now. She was going to call you in a minute. Can I put it on speakerphone? Certainly. You me all more, do you hear? Yes. Great. Okay, I've got Susan here with me. She's got great results, and she's ready to take on your case. Hello, Mr. Walker, Susan Curran. Hi, Susan. Call me Grant. Okay, Grant, John told me about your situation. Are there any new developments or information you can share? Oh, of course there is. Grant spoke about all the latest events in detail. He realized along the way that he might be paying for her time, but he didn't care. Finally, he finished his story. Grant, we have enough to get her claim dismissed, and then you can countersue for treason. You don't have children, so that makes things easier. You can try to split the property or claim more. Your other option is to try to convince her lawyer to drop the lawsuit, and you could agree to irreconcilable differences if you want to avoid undue publicity. What if I just want to talk to her? Sorry, what do you mean? She won't talk to me. She thinks I cheated on her, and from what I've seen, I can understand why. I don't think there's a way to get her to communicate with you, Grant. Perhaps if you file a lawsuit, she will speak in court, but there is no guarantee. Understand, I miss her and I want to try to fix things. So, to sum it up, you did nothing wrong. You caught your wife in bed with another man. She filed for divorce, falsely accusing you of cheating without mentioning her own. She doesn't want to talk to you. Despite this, you want to try to save your marriage. Well, even if it makes me look like a wimp, I guess so. It doesn't seem like a weakness to me. I think you show a lot of maturity in being able to handle the facts the way you do. Let me think for a minute. Then John, who, of course, was listening to the conversation between Susan and his friend, intervened. Are you sure, buddy? I mean, you caught her. John, I wasn't sure before this call, but I'm sure now. My Angie has a temper, and her there is pride. It's a bad combination, but I knew it from the beginning and dealt with it for years. But she is also the most alive person I know. She keeps me on my toes and makes life interesting. I don't want her to be that interesting, but I think I can forgive her if she just talks to me. Before John could respond, Susan spoke again. Here's what I think you can do. I can show you the evidence of her lawyer and see if she can sue when we'll understand that I was mistaken. Then you can try to improve your relationship with her. This won't work. Her pride will not allow her to take the first step. Don't get me wrong, she will feel terrible and will probably beat herself up and refuse to talk out of guilt. We'll be separated for a long time while I try to convince her that we can fix everything, and I'll probably have to go through her parents, which would be unfair to them. Then we will let the case go to court and fight. How will this end differently? Well, we can show evidence as late in the process as possible and then ask for mandatory counseling. The court usually grants such requests. This is not a guarantee, and your communication will take place in the presence of a consultant, but you will get a chance to talk with her. I like this option better. But there are disadvantages. The case will become part of the public record. Although no one will see the video, your testimony about her infidelity and description of the evidence will be part of the case. Not many people read cases like this, but if your wife's pride is as you describe, it could make things difficult for her. And this can reduce the chances of successful reconciliation. I guess I didn't think of that. There are some other things I can try, but again, there are no guarantees. Would you trust me on this? What do you mean? Now that I've seen the case, I know her lawyer. We have worked together on several things before, and he is a very reasonable person. I think we can ask to see one of the judges. I will ask for a preliminary hearing in the judge's office and try to convince him to schedule counseling without a trial. This is extremely unusual, but we can try to convince the right judge. Action. Angie felt bad. She had lost weight and Carla was worried about her. She always had the feeling that she was making some mistake. Damn him and his messages. Her lawyer contacted her and told her she needed to be in court next Thursday. She asked if she could bring her parents and was told that they could come, but they might not be allowed to attend the preliminary hearing in the judge's office. Another reason for her worry was that despite her anger and pride, she was smart. She knew that her statement that she has not changed will not withstand any criticism, let alone trial. For the 1,000th time, she wished that he would just react as he should. He had to shout back, deny her, insult her. Then they could consider everything over and move on. Instead, he planted a seed of doubt, was sad, and kept trying to call her. Despite her anger, she knew she couldn't be angry forever. And her anger was her armor. People left her alone when she was angry. Anger allowed her to see the world the way she wanted, without other opinions, because it silenced people. So over time, Angie felt more and more vulnerable and insecure. I still don't understand what's going on. 2 of my friends got divorced, and they never went to the judge's office. Angie, I told you, judges do this sometimes, and it's always better to respect their wishes. And this is a judge's office, not an office. Okay, Angie rolled her eyes. Her mother reached out and squeezed her hand. Angie looked at her and regretted doing it. Several weeks passed, and she and her mother didn't talk like they used to, and it bothered Angie. Her parents were always there for her, but she was especially close to her mother. She knew that she had deeply disappointed her with what she had done, but at the moment Angie saw no other choice but to see it through. Her parents sat on chairs that were opposite the door to the judge's office. Angie then looked at her lawyer and nodded. He raised his hand and knocked. Come in. Angie expected the room to be larger, but it was cozy. She saw bookshelves and a large table where the judge sat, a short elderly man who looked at her but smiled. Then she saw him and her heart seemed to skip a beat. She knew he would be here, but it was still hard to see him after so many weeks. Seeing him, she felt strange. She expected anger, and there was some, but what surprised her was that she thought he needed a haircut, that he should have chosen a different shirt to go with his suit, that he looked good despite it. Stop it, she thought to herself and stuck out her chin. She thought she saw the judge smiling slightly, but she could only imagine it. She looked straight at the judge, refusing to look at Grant or even roughly in his direction. The judge pointed to the 2 remaining empty chairs, and they sat down. Her lawyer sat next to Grant's lawyer, and Angie sat next to hers, as far away from her husband as possible. Angie noticed a man standing behind and to the side of the judge and assumed he was a bailiff. Now that everyone is here, let's begin. We are gathered here to discuss the divorce petition of Mrs. Angela Walker against her husband, Mr. Grant Walker, on the grounds of adultery. I need to confirm. Are you Mr. Walker? The judge looked at Grant. Yes, Your Honor. Are you Mrs. Walker? Yes, Your Honor. Both of you have agreed to abide by any orders I may give after this discussion. You can nod if you agree. Both Angie and Grant nodded. Mrs. Walker, can I call you Angie? Angie nodded. Can I call you Grant? Grant nodded too. The judge smiled and continued. Thank you both. It makes things easier and doesn't sound so formal. You can call me Your Honor or Judge Everlie. He chuckled, showing his sense of humor, and the lawyers laughed along with him. Angie and Grant didn't laugh. Angie, I understand that you want a divorce because you claim that your husband had an inappropriate relationship with a woman. Yes, I want, and yes, I have, Angie said with slight heat, which the judge ignored. And you witnessed this? Yes, Your Honor. Angie added as the judge raised an eyebrow. Grant, did you have an inappropriate relationship with a woman, as your wife claims? No, Your Honor. Liar, Angie shouted, getting up from her chair. Angie, sit down, the judge demanded. Angie's lawyer extended his hand to her, but she pulled back her and sat back looking angry. Wow, you are lively. Angie, do you have any evidence to support your claim? Your Honor, may I? Angie's lawyer asked. The judge nodded. Mrs. Walker came to her husband's place of work to bring him dinner. He worked late nights and weekends for over 2 months with a woman from another department. Upon arrival, she saw the woman take off your dress in the presence of Mr. Walker. The woman was naked. Mrs. Walker left her place of work without being noticed by her husband or woman. I understand, I understand. Not good, very bad. Grant, what is your version of events? Grant's lawyer, Susan, placed her hand on his arm, indicating that she would speak. Grant sighed and nodded. Your Honor, my client does not deny that he worked many nights with this woman, but they did. He also does not deny that the woman did take off her clothes that night. But if his wife had stayed a moment longer, she would have seen Mr. Walker telling the woman off and demanding that she get dressed and leave. Oh my God, Angie said, standing up again. Am I supposed to believe that you just told a beautiful woman to get dressed when she offered herself? Angie suddenly choked back tears. Everyone immediately jumped to their feet. Both Grant's and Angie's lawyers moved towards Angie, Grant with an expression of pain. Susan held him back by whispering something in his ear. Judge Everlie noticed this and came out from behind his desk, speaking. Well, Angie. Wait, honey. Everyone except Mrs. Walker, come out. We'll talk to her a little. By this time, the judge had already approached her and placed his father's hand on Angie's shoulder, who was looking down, clearly holding back her emotions. Everyone went out into the corridor, including the bailiff. When they were alone, the judge helped her sit down and returned to his seat. Angie, what should I do with you? Angie finally managed to control herself and just sniffled. She didn't think he needed her to answer, so she remained silent. He looked at her for a few more moments and spoke. I'm going to show you something, and it's going to hurt. But you need to see it. I asked everyone to leave because I don't think you need such a big audience. Fine? I suppose so. With these words, the judge pointed to a large TV on a wheeled stand. He lifted the remote and the screen came to life. Angie saw that the screen was split in half. A moment later, she saw Grant and Kelly to the left and knew what she was about to see. Please, please no, she sobbed. I can't see it. You mean see again? Should I watch it again? The judge asked calmly, looking at her. She simply lowered her head for a moment without answering, tears streaming down her cheeks. She gasped when she saw herself exiting the elevator and realized it was CCTV footage. When it came to the point where Kelly took off her dress, Angie was openly crying and could barely see. Judge Everlie paused and handed her a napkin. He waited patiently while she gathered. When she was ready, he said, I will continue. Stay strong, Angie. She watched, seeing herself running away, and sighed, making it obvious that she was still watching the video. She saw Grant turn and appear to scream. Kelly stepped back, covering her chest with her hand. She suddenly grabbed her dress and got dressed while Grant turned away from her. She then ran out of the office and ran down the corridor. Angie's mouth was open. The judge returned and sat down next to her as her mouth began to open and close like a fish. His face turned pale and a tear rolled down his cheek. "Oh no, oh no, oh no." The judge put his hand on her shoulder, and she suddenly leaned towards him and began to cry quietly. The judge heard her voice muted his robe. "What have I done? Oh my God, I am so sorry." He winced at her pain. Angie cried for almost 30 minutes, and the judge was there the whole time until she calmed down. Finally, she pulled herself together and apologized to him. "Sorry, Your Honor. I'm just sorry." She looked at her lap as she said this. "Look at me, Angie." She looked up. "We all make mistakes. All we can hope to do is learn from them. Oh, I know it's always tempting to blame others for our mistakes or pretend they didn't happen, but it serves no purpose other than depriving us of the opportunity to grow." He stood up and returned to his chair. He sat down and took the folder, holding it in his hands. "Here is a statement from Miss Kelly Dyson for the HR department of your husband's employer. She admits that she tried to seduce him. She also states that he turned her down every time, making it clear that he was happily married." Angie closed her eyes. "Oh well, no more tears, at least for now. I didn't mean to torture you. I just knew you needed to see and hear the truth. What should I do now?" "Well, luckily I'm a judge," he said with a smile, "and I have certain powers to make certain things happen. So, before I bring everyone back, I will tell you privately that I am ordering you to take anger management classes." Angie stood up straight and tense, but the judge ignored it if he noticed. "I know some good places, and my assistant can give you the details later. I expect you to complete at least 10 sessions. After that, you can stop if you graduate. Or if you think this is useful, you can continue. It's time for you to master your anger and take control of your life." Angie nodded slowly. She knew she needed help. "As for everything else, I will say it in front of everyone. Are you ready?" Angie took a deep breath and nodded. The judge pressed a button on the phone and spoke. "Please tell them to come back. There is no need to knock." Grant spent an awkward 45 minutes in the hallway, sitting opposite my father-in-law and mother-in-law. Carla looked sad, perhaps a little apologetic, but neither he nor she said anything. Larry, his father-in-law, didn't meet his gaze. Grant hoped everything was going well. When he saw Angie enter the judge's office, he almost forgot to breathe. She was so beautiful. He hoped they could try again and knew that if they did, they would be waiting a long time and many difficult times, but after seeing her, he realized that he wanted her back in his life. Finally, they were told to return, and they entered and sat down in their seats. Judge Everly waited patiently until everyone was seated. He cleared his throat. "Now that everyone knows about the evidence, I'll ask a few questions. Grant, do you want to divorce Angie?" "No, Your Honor." Angie gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. She leaned forward and turned to Grant, a look of confusion and surprise in her eyes. "Understand? And you, Angie, do you want to continue the case in court?" Angie turned back to the judge and muttered something. "Speak up, darling." "No, Your Honor." "Okay, it's all over now. It's decided. You can hold hands, kiss, and live happily as if none of this happened." Grant and Angie looked embarrassed. The lawyers could hardly contain their smiles. "No? Then maybe we need to think about some things. Grant, is there anything you would have done differently?" "Your Honor?" Grant did not understand where the judge was leading. "Did you play any role in this? Or is it all your wife's fault?" Grant just stared at the judge, feeling like he was missing something. The judge sighed and shook his head. "Put yourself in her shoes, son. If it was her, working late with an attractive man for months, and you walked in and saw him stripped naked, what did you think about it?" Grant turned red with embarrassment. "Same as Angie, Your Honor." "Can you imagine how this could have been avoided?" "Yes, Your Honor, I could have told her right away that Kelly was harassing me. Judge Everly looked up at the ceiling and raised his hands. Hallelujah, there is still hope. Grant and Angie still looked uncomfortable. The lawyers could hardly contain their laughter at his antics. Angie, could you have responded better? Yes, Your Honor. I could have asked him what happened after I saw it. What a clever girl. So, I think we understand the need to improve communication. I therefore order both of you to undergo marriage counseling. 10 joint sessions and 10 separate ones for each of you. I still have questions. Grant, do you love Angie? Grant could not hold back his tears and answered, Yes, Your Honor, more than I ever imagined. The judge turned to Angie, whose eyes cried after Grant's words. Angie, do you love Grant? Angie, unable to speak, simply began to cry and quickly nodded her head. Well, this really gives me hope. Seriously, you both have a lot of things that need fixing. It won't be easy, but I believe you can do it. I expect the attorneys to make all necessary arrangements to withdraw the claim and to ensure that my orders are followed. Having said that, I think we're done here. You can leave. Everyone said, Thank you, Your Honor, and everyone except Angie began to leave. Grant stopped and watched as Angie ran up to Judge Everly and hugged him. The elderly judge looked surprised for a moment and then returned her hug with a tear in his eye. 4 months later, Grant picked up a laughing Angie in his arms and carried her across the threshold of their new home. A lot has changed since they were in Judge Everly's office. It was awkward at first. After Grant saw her hug the judge, he wanted to pick it up and spin it, but a moment came to mind when he held the vase in the air, threatening the man, and he hesitated. He knew the judge was right. They had a long way to go. Angie was confused and, for some reason, angry, and perhaps for the first time in her life, tired of this and how it was affecting her. Her life. She saw Grant and realized how close she had been to ruining everything, and she knew there was a long way to go. They ended up walking towards each other almost awkwardly, just holding hands and promising to talk later and then leaving. It wasn't until the following week that they were able to hold their first session. It was organized so that there were 3 one-hour sessions every Wednesday. The first and last hour were individual, and the middle was joint. It was planned that they would change the order, who comes first and last every week. Angie lived with her parents for 2 weeks, both of whom agreed to walk slowly to avoid annoying neighbors. They talked every day, at first after work, but as the days passed, they stayed in touch longer and began talking before work and during lunch. There were tears and laughter, but the relationship gradually improved in their favor. At the beginning, they agreed that Grant would find an apartment and then put the house up for sale. They will decide further steps later. They accepted an offer on the house 2 days after they listed it and made good money. Consultations went well, both individual and joint, and, of course, anger management courses for Angie, which she told Grant about. His reaction was to say, Don't let them completely drain your fighting spirit. I like it when you're lively. This caused Angie a few tears because it helped her understand how much he loves her for who she is. Their counselor let them know from the first week how glad she was that they wanted to get back together. She usually works with couples who don't want that. She made it clear that there would still be obstacles because cheating, real or imagined, hurts and pain takes time to heal. Grant again realized how he could have avoided this and actually took his share of the blame for their near breakup. He also realized that some of his views on relationships between men and women, especially at work, were outdated. It is unacceptable to allow women to behave inappropriately. He learned to set boundaries. The consultant suggested that they explore Angie's decision to choose a guest room, and they realized that although it was her act, she loved him too much to do in their bed. Angie realized that she needed to be confident in herself and not compare herself to some false image of the ideal woman. Grant chose her and loved her for who she was. If he wanted something else, he would have looked for it. Grant realized he could help her by giving her the reassurance she needed. He also realized that he shouldn't let her anger make him withdraw. Angie had to realize that she could completely trust him around other women and she had already seen evidence of that. Ultimately, Judge Everly said they needed to communicate. They were determined to learn, and they did. Their consultant gave them an assignment. Every week they had to say something to each other that made them feel vulnerable in order to build trust. It worked. Angie helped set up the apartment and moved in a month after their first session. That's when they faced their first big problem: sex. It was awkward, and they both realized there was still work to be done. They discussed it with a counselor, and he recommended a sex therapist. It changed their lives. It also took time, but they became close again a month after they started sleeping in the same bed. They learned to talk openly about their desires, likes, and dislikes. They learned that Angie has a greater desire for sex than Grant and how to deal with it. After another month, they had a better sex life than ever and felt more in love than ever. Friends and family were delighted with the positive changes. Some didn't even know what happened, but they noticed a new connection between them. Carla and Angie became close again, and Carla even started taking anger management classes. Angie's new ability to control her emotions was reflected at work, and she was offered a new position opening and managing the Livingston office of her coffee company. She even kept her regular hours, no late nights. Grant became a better version of himself and impressed in his new position. Since Grant's office was near the airport, they decided to find a house somewhere between Angie's work and his office. They bought a house in Cleveland, Texas, and were thrilled. They closed the deal 4 months after meeting with the judge. Angie continued to take anger management classes until she was told she was wasting her time. They all see both marriage and sex counselors every 2 months and continue to get to know each other. A week before the move, Angie came to Grant's office to go to lunch. They came in and said hello to Hugh and then left. As they walked through the foyer, Kelly Dyson walked in from the street. Grant felt Angie squeeze his hand, but they continued walking. Kelly rested in his new position. Since Grant's office was near the airport, they decided to find a house somewhere between Angie's work and his office. They bought a house in Cleveland, Texas, and were thrilled. They closed the deal 4 months after meeting with the judge. Angie continued to take anger management classes until she was told she was wasting her time. They all see both marriage and sex counselors every 2 months and continue to get to know each other. A week before the move, Angie came to Grant's office to go to lunch. They came in and said hello to Hugh and then left. As they walked through the foyer, Kelly Dyson walked in from the street. Grant felt Angie squeeze his hand, but they continued walking. Kelly's eyes widened when she saw them, and she lowered her head and turned to the side, avoiding approaching them. Once they were outside, Grant looked down and saw Angie blushing a little. She then said through clenched teeth, "This bitch, I would." She stopped herself and took a deep breath. Grant looked at his fiery little wife. He smiled, glad that her spirit was under control, but did not disappear. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.